Welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. We are reading the book titled Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, annotated by Sharon Lechter. So as I'm reading the book, you'll hear me say notes, and those are the comments by Sharon Lechter interspersed throughout the chapters. In the previous video, we find Napoleon Hill, who is going as Mr. Earthbound, and he's extracting a confession from the devil. And in that confession, we are getting to find out that the churches and the schools, so religion and education, are actually working in favor of the devil, helping him indoctrinate the future victims. As he says, the devil says that pretty much 98% of the people are under his control right now because they do not have definite of purpose and they don't think for themselves. I hope that you and I are one of those 2% that are free from the devil's grasp. And you're wondering, well, how can Napoleon Hill go in and extract this confession from the devil? And we learn in one of the previous chapters that the minute that you let go of fears, you also let go of the hold that the devil has on you. And also we learn the definition of the devil is according to Napoleon Hill in this book, and how the institutions of education and religion serve him in helping create people that don't think for themselves. And I'm not going to give it all away, so you can go ahead and read that. But I do hope that you and I are those that are free and that we think for ourselves. Sometimes it may feel like a lonely road, but hey, eventually we do find each other, don't we? You and I have found each other, and that I'm happy for. And you're asking, well, why does Napoleon Hill why can he actually extract this confession out of the devil? Well, because, and it's not that the devil isn't too far away. The thing is that Napoleon Hill has let go of his fears, and now he can stand firm in that strength, accessing the power within him and that infinite intelligence that lets him know that, hey, you got this. Don't have to be afraid of anything. And one of the other things before I start on the next chapter that was mentioned, I thought it was worth sharing with you, was when either, I can't remember if it was Napoleon Hill or if it was the devil himself, but they were saying that the solution sometimes that we seek is inside the problem. So I guess if we stop long enough and start looking at the other side, and not from fear but from gratitude that, hey, there's a little jigsaw puzzle we can solve, we might actually find that the piece is right there, and we can work things out. Sometimes we've got to be a little bit patient with ourselves, and patient with the world, and everything sometimes has to cook, like a good stew. It has to cook. You put in all the stuff, but it doesn't taste good right away, but give it a little time, and then it blends. And maybe if you're going through something, if I'm going through something, we just got to sit back, have faith, hope, be steadfast in our purpose, and persevere. Okay, now I believe that I see Mr. Earthbound, aka Napoleon Hill, and the devil. They're already setting themselves up in that confession booth. So let's pretend we're little flies and let's join in. Chapter 10, Self-Discipline. Question: what preparation must one undergo before being able to move with definiteness of purpose at all times? Answer: one must gain mastery over self. This is the second of the 7 principles. The person who is not master of himself can never be master of others. Lack of self-mastery is, of itself, the most destructive form of indefiniteness. Note: the person who is not master of himself can never be master of others. How true this is. Think of our political leaders who have fallen from grace because they could not control their own behavior. How can we trust them to control ours? End note. Question. Where should one begin when making a start at control over self? Answer. By mastering the 3 appetites responsible for most of one's lack of self-discipline. The 3 appetites are 1. The desire for food. 2. The desire for expression of sex. 3. The desire to express loosely organized opinions. Question. Does man have other appetites which need control? Answer. Yes, many of them. But these 3 are the ones which should be conquered first. When a man becomes master of these 3 appetites, he has developed enough self-discipline to conquer easily those of lesser importance. Question. But these are natural appetites. They must be indulged if one is to be healthy and happy. Answer. To be sure, they are natural appetites, but they are also dangerous because people who have not mastered themselves overfeed the appetites. Self-mastery contemplates sufficient control over the appetites to enable one to feed them what they need and withhold food not needed. Question. Your viewpoint is both interesting and educational. Describe the details through which I may understand how and under what circumstance people overfeed the appetites. Answer. Take the desire for physical food, for example. The majority of people are so weak in self-discipline, they fill their stomachs with combinations of rich food which please the taste but overwork the organs of digestion and elimination. They pour into their stomachs both quantity and combinations of food which the body chemist can dispose of only by converting the food into deadly toxic poisons. These poisons clog and stagnate the body's sewer system until it slows down in its work of elimination of waste matter. After a while, the sewer system stops working altogether, and the victim has what he calls constipation. By that time, he is ready for the hospital. Auto-intoxication, or body sewer poisoning, takes the machinery of the brain and rolls it into something resembling a wad of putty. The victim then becomes sluggish in his physical movements and mentally irritable and fussy. If he could only take one good look at and one bad smell of it, his sewer system, he would be ashamed to look himself in the face. City sewers are not the pleasantest of places when they become overloaded or clogged, but they are clean and sweet compared with the intestinal sewer when it has been overloaded or clogged. This is not a pretty story to be associated with the pleasant and necessary act of eating, but that is where it belongs because overeating and wrong food combinations are the evils which cause auto-intoxication. People who eat wisely and keep their body sewers clean handicap me because a clean body sewer generally means a sound body and a brain that functions properly. Imagine, if your imagination can be stretched that far, how any human being could move with definiteness of purpose with his body sewer filled with enough poison to kill 100 people if it were injected into their bloodstream directly. Note, here again, Napoleon Hill is far ahead of his time. Science eventually caught up with Hill and even surpassed his intuition about physical processes and how they link to mental and emotional health. End note. Question. And all this trouble is the result of lack of control over physical appetite for food? Answer. Well, if you wish to be absolutely correct, you should say that improper eating is responsible for the majority of the ills of the body, and practically all headaches. If you want proof of this, select 100 people suffering with headaches and give each of them a thorough washing out of their body sewer systems with a high enema and observe that No fewer than 25 of the headaches will disappear within a few minutes after their sewers have been cleaned. Question. From all you say about the intestinal tract, I gather the impression that mastery over the physical appetite for food means also mastery over the habit of neglecting to keep the intestines clean. Answer. Yes, that is true. It is just as important to eliminate the waste matter of the body and the unused portions of food as it is to take the right amount and the correct combinations of food. Question. I never thought of auto-intoxication as being one of your devices of control over people. And I'm utterly shocked to know how many people are victims of this subtle enemy. Let's hear what you have to say of the other two appetites. Answer. Well, take the desire for sex expression. Now there is a force with which I master the weak and the strong, the old and the young, the ignorant and the wise. In fact, I master all who neglect to master sex. Question. How can one master the emotion of sex? Answer. By the simple process of transmuting that emotion into some form of activity other than copulation. Sex is one of the greatest of all forces which motivate human beings. Because this fact, it is also one of the most dangerous forces. If humans would control their sex desires and transmute them into a driving force with which to carry on their occupation, that is, if they spent on their work 1/2 the time they dissipate in pursuit of sex, they would never know poverty. Question. Do I understand you to imply there is a relationship between sex and poverty? Answer. Yes. Where sex is not under definite control, if allowed to run its natural course, sex will quickly lead one into the habit of drifting. Question. Is there any relationship between sex and leadership? Answer. Yes. All great leaders in every walk of life are highly sexed, but they follow the habit of controlling their sex desires, switching them into a driving force behind their occupation. Question. Is the habit of overindulgence in sex as dangerous as the habit of taking narcotics or liquor? Answer. There is no difference between these habits. Both lead to hypnotic control through the habit of drifting. Question. Why does the world look upon sex as something vulgar? Answer. Because of the vulgar abuse people have made of this emotion. It is not sex that is vulgar. It is the individual who neglects or refuses to control and guide it. Question. Do you mean by your statement that one should not indulge the desire for sex? Answer. No, I mean that sex, like all other forces available to man, should be understood, mastered, and made to serve man. The desire for sex expression is as natural as the desire for food. The desire can no more be killed than one can entirely stop a river from flowing. If the emotion of sex is shut off from the natural mode of expression, it will break out in some other less desirable form, just as a river will, if dammed, break through and flow round the dam. The person who has self-discipline understands the emotion of sex, respects it, and learns to control and transmute it into constructive activities. Question. And just what damage is there in overindulgence of sex? Answer. The greatest damage is that it depletes the source of man's greatest driving force and wastes without adequate compensation man's creative energy. It dissipates energy needed by nature to maintain physical health. Sex is nature's most useful therapeutic force. It depletes the magnetic energy which is the source of an attractive, pleasing personality. It removes the sparkle from one's eyes and sets up discord in the tone of one's voice. It destroys enthusiasm, subdues ambition, and leads inevitably to the habit of drifting on all subjects. Question. I would like for you to answer my question in another way by telling me what beneficial ends the emotion of sex may be made to attain if mastered and transmuted. Answer. Controlled sex supplies the magnetic force that attracts people to one another. It is the most important factor of a pleasing personality. It gives quality to the tone of voice and enables one to convey through the voice any feeling desired. It serves, as nothing else can serve, to give motive power to one's desires. It keeps the nervous system charged with the energy needed to carry on the work of maintaining the body. It sharpens the imagination and enables one to create useful ideas. It gives quickness and definiteness to one's physical and mental movements. It gives one persistence and perseverance in the pursuit of one's major purpose in life. It is a great antidote for all fear. It gives one immunity against discouragement. It helps to master laziness and procrastination. It gives one physical and mental endurance while undergoing any form of opposition or defeat. It gives one the fighting qualities necessary under all circumstances for self-defense. In brief, it makes winners and not quitters. Question. Are those all the advantages you claim for controlled sex energy? Answer. No. They are only some of the more important benefits it provides. Perhaps some will believe the greatest of all the virtues of sex is that it's nature's method of perpetuation of all living things. This alone should remove all thought that sex is vulgar. Question. I gather from what you say that the emotion of sex is a virtue, not a fault. Answer. It is a virtue when controlled and directed to the attainment of desirable ends. It is a fault when neglected and permitted to lead to acts of lust. Question. Why aren't these truths taught to children by their parents and the public schools? Answer. The neglect is due to ignorance of the real nature of sex. It is just as necessary in maintaining health for one to understand and properly use the emotion of sex as it is to keep the body sewer system clean. Both subjects should be taught in all public schools and all homes where there are children. Question. Wouldn't the majority of parents need instruction on the proper function and use of sex before they could intelligently teach their children? Question. Yes, and so would the public school teachers. Question. What relative position of importance would you give to the need for accurate knowledge on the subject of sex? Answer. It is next to the top of the list. There is but one thing of greater importance to human beings. That is accurate thought. Note. There is but one thing of greater importance to human beings. That is accurate thought. End note. Question. Do I understand you to say that knowledge of the true functions of sex and the ability to think accurately are the two things of greatest importance to mankind? Answer. That is what I intended you to understand. Accurate thinking comes first because it is the solution to all man's problems, the answer to all his prayers, the source of opulence and all material possessions. Accurate thinking is aided by properly controlled and directed sex emotion because sex emotion is the same energy as that which with one thinks. It begins with those who desire self-determination sufficiently to be willing to pay its price. No one can be entirely free, spiritually, mentally, physically, and economically, without learning the art of accurate thinking. No one can learn to think accurately without including, as a part of the needed knowledge, information on the control of sex emotion through transmutation. Question. It will be a great surprise to many people to learn this is so close a relationship between thinking and sex emotion. Tell us now about the third appetite, and let's see what it has to do with self-discipline. Answer. The habit of expressing loosely organized opinions is one of the most destructive habits. Its destructiveness consists in its tendency to influence people to guess instead of searching for the facts when they form opinions, create ideas, or organize plans. The habit develops a grasshopper mind, one that jumps from one thing to another but never completes anything. And of course, carelessness in the expression of opinions leads to the habit of drifting. From there, it is only a step or two until one is bound by the law of hypnotic rhythm, which automatically prohibits accurate thinking. Note: the habit of expressing loosely organized opinion is one of the most destructive of habits. End note. Question: what other disadvantages are there in free expression of opinions? Answer. The person who talks too much informs the world of his aims and plans and gives to others the opportunity to profit by his ideas. Wise men keep their plans to themselves and refrain from expressing uninvited opinions. This prevents others from appropriating their ideas and makes it difficult for others to interfere with their plans. Question: why do so many people indulge in the habit of expressing uninvited opinions? Answer: the habit is one way of expressing egotism and vanity. The desire for self-expression is inborn in people. The motive behind the habit is to attract the attention of others and to impress them favorably. Actually, it has just the opposite effect. When the self-invited speaker attracts attention, it usually is unfavorable. Question: yes, what other disadvantages has the habit? Answer: the person who insists on talking seldom has an opportunity to learn by listening to others. Question: but isn't it true that a magnetic speaker often puts himself in the way of opportunity to benefit himself by attracting the attention of others through his powers of oratory? Answer: yes, a magnetic orator does have an asset of tremendous value in his ability to impress people by his speech. But he cannot make the best use of this asset if he forces his speech on others without their invitation. No single quality adds more to one's personality than the ability to speak with emotional feeling, force, and conviction. But the speaker must not impose his speech upon others without being invited to do so. There is an old saying that nothing is worth more than that its actual cost. This applies as well to the free, uninvited expression of opinions as to material things. Question: what about people who volunteer their opinions by expressing them in writing? Do they also suffer by lack of self-discipline? Answer: one of the worst pests on earth is the person who writes uninvited letters to people of prominence. Men in public office, moving picture stars, men who have succeeded in business or written a best-selling book, and people whose names appear often in the newspapers are continuously besieged by people who write letters expressing their opinion on all subjects. Question: but the writing of uninvited letters is a harmless way of finding pleasure through self-expression, is it not? What damage does one do by the habit? Answer: habits are contagious. Every habit attracts a flock of its relatives. The habit of doing anything that is useless leads to the formation of other habits that are useless, especially the habit of drifting. But that is not all the dangers associated with the habit of indulging in uninvited expression of opinions. The habit creates enemies and places in their hands dangerous weapons by which they may do great injury to the one who indulges in it. Thieves and confidence men and racketeers pay big prices for the names and addresses of the writers of uninvited letters. Knowing as they do, the writers of these letters become easy victims of all manner of schemes that result in the loss of their money. They refer to the writers of such letters as nuts. If you wish to know how foolish people are who write uninvited letters, read the nut column of any newspaper, the column in which the paper publishes the voluntary opinions of its readers, and you will see for yourself how the writers of such letters antagonize people and invite opposition from others. Note: take a moment to remember that letter writing was about the only way to communicate in the written form when Napoleon Hill wrote this manuscript. As you read, think about how his thoughts would apply to today's world of blogging and social networking. End note. Question: I have no idea, Your Majesty, that people get into so much difficulty through uninvited expression of their opinions. But now that you have brought up the subject, I do remember writing the editor of a prominent magazine an uninvited letter of criticism, which cost me a fine position on his staff. A nice fat salary. Answer: that is a perfect example. The proper place to begin self-discipline is right where you stand. The way to begin is by recognizing the truth that there is nothing for good or evil throughout the myriads of universes except the power of natural law. There is no individual personality anywhere throughout the myriad of universes with the slightest power to influence a human being save nature and human beings themselves. There is no human being now living, no human being has ever lived, and no human being ever will live with the right or the power to deprive another human being of the inborn privilege of free and independent thought. The privilege is the only one over which any human being can have absolute control. No adult human being ever loses the right to freedom of thought, but most humans lose the benefits of this privilege either by neglect or because it has been taken away from them by their parents or religious instructors before the age of understanding. These are self-evident truths, no less important because they are being called to your attention by the devil than they would if brought to your attention by my opposition. Question: but what are people going to lean upon in the hour of emergency when they know not where nor to whom to appeal? Answer: let them lean upon the only dependable power available to any human being. Question: and what is that? Answer: themselves. The power of their own thoughts, the only power they can control and may rely upon, the only power which cannot be perverted, colored, modified, and falsified by their dishonest fellow human beings. Note: the only dependable power available to any human being, the power of their own thoughts, the only power they can control and may rely upon. You may not be able to control other people, but you can control how you react to them and their actions. This is an easy thing to say, but much more difficult to do. We tend to want to change other people when we can truly only change ourselves and how we react to others. End note. Question: all you say seems logical, but why must I come to the devil to discover such profound truths? Let's get back to the 7 principles. You have already disclosed enough information to show clearly that the secret of how to break the power of hypnotic rhythm is wrapped in the 7 principles. You have shown, too, that the most important of these principles is self-discipline. Now go ahead and describe the other 5 principles you have not yet mentioned, and indicate what part they play in giving one self-discipline. Answer: first, let me summarize that part of my confession we have already covered. I have frankly told you that my two most effective devices for mastering human beings are the habit of drifting and the law of hypnotic rhythm. I have shown you that drifting is not a natural law, but a man-made habit which leads to man's submission to the law of hypnotic rhythm. The 7 principles are the media by which man may break the hold of hypnotic rhythm and take possession again of his own mind. You see, therefore, the 7 principles are the 7 steps which lead victims of hypnotic rhythm out of the self-made prisons in which they are bound. Question. The 7 principles are the master key that unlocks the door to spiritual, mental, and economic self-determination? Is that true? Answer. Yes, that's another way of stating the truth. End of chapter. We're going to stay right here and move on to the next chapter, chapter 11, titled Learning from Adversity. Question. Is failure ever a benefit to man? Answer. Yes, indeed. Learning from adversity is the 3rd of the 7 principles, but few people know that every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. Still fewer people know the difference between temporary defeat and failure. If this knowledge were generally known, I would be deprived of one of my strongest weapons of control over human beings. Question. But I understood you to say that failure is one of your greatest allies. I got the impression from your confession that failure causes people to lose ambition and quit trying, and then you take them over without opposition on their part. Answer. That is just the point. I take them over after they quit trying. If they knew the difference between temporary defeat and failure, they would not quit when they meet with opposition from life. If they knew that every form of defeat and all failures bring with them the seed of unborn opportunity, they would keep on fighting and win. Success usually is but one short step beyond the point where one quits fighting. Question. Is that all one might learn from adversity, defeat, and failure? Answer. No, that is the least of what one might learn. I hate to tell you this, but failure often serves as a blessing in disguise because it breaks the grip of hypnotic rhythm and frees the mind for a fresh start. Question. Now we're getting somewhere. So you have confessed, at long last, that even nature's law of hypnotic rhythm can be, and often is, annulled by nature herself? Is that correct? Answer. No. That is not stating the matter accurately. Nature never reverses any of her natural laws. Nature does not take away a human being's freedom of thought through hypnotic rhythm. The individual gives up his freedom by abuse of this law. If a man jumped from a tree and was killed by the sudden impact of his body with the earth through the law of gravity, you wouldn't say nature murdered him, would you? You would say the man neglected to relate himself properly to the law of gravity. Question. I am beginning to see. The law of hypnotic rhythm is capable of both negative and positive application. It may drag one down to slavery through loss of the privilege of freedom of thought, or it may help one rise to great heights of achievement through the free use of thought, depending on how the individual relates himself to the law. Is that correct? Answer. Now you have it right. Question. But what about failure? One does not fail intentionally with purpose or for thought. No one encourages temporary defeat. These are circumstances over which the individual often has no control whatsoever. How then can it be said that nature does not take away one's freedom of thought when failure destroys ambition, willpower, and the self-confidence essential to make a fresh start? Answer. Failure is a man-made circumstance. It is never real until it has been accepted by man as permanent. Stating it another way, failure is a state of mind. Therefore, it is something an individual can control until he neglects to exercise this privilege. Nature does not force people to fail, but nature does impose her law of hypnotic rhythm upon all minds, and through this law gives permanency to the thoughts which dominate those minds. In other words, failure thoughts are taken over by the law of hypnotic rhythm and made permanent if the individual accepts any circumstances as being permanent failure. That same law just as readily takes over and makes permanent thought of the success. Note: failure is a state of mind. Therefore, it is something an individual can control until he neglects to exercise this privilege. Can this be true? Has Hill convinced you that failure is a man-made circumstance? I believe he makes a compelling cause. If I look closely at my life, my own successes and failures in business, mistakes and missteps, can I claim that anyone is responsible other than myself? Will a personal inventory of your life yield different results? Hill has helped me place a different value on failure than I did in the past. End note. Question: what part, then, does failure play in helping an individual breaking the grip of hypnotic rhythm after that law has been fastened upon his mind? Answer: failure brings a climax in which one has the privilege of clearing his mind of fear and making a new start in another direction. Failure proves conclusively that something is wrong with one's aims or the plans by which the object of these aims is sought. Failure is the dead end of the habit path one has been following, and when it is reached, it forces one to leave that path and take up another, thereby creating a new rhythm. But failure does more than this. It gives an individual an opportunity to test himself, wherein he may learn how much willpower he possesses. Failure also forces people to learn many truths they would never discover without it. Failure often leads an individual to an understanding of the power of self-discipline, without which no one could turn back after having once been the victim of hypnotic rhythm. Study the lives of all people who achieve outstanding success in any calling, and observe with profit that their success is usually in exact ratio to their experiences of defeat before succeeding. Note: failure brings a climax in which one has the privilege of clearing his mind of fear and making a new start in another direction. End note. Question: is this all you have to say of the advantages of failure? Answer: no, I have barely begun. If you want the real significance of adversity, failure, defeat, and all other experiences which break up a human being's habits and force him to form new habits, watch nature at her work. Nature uses illness to break the physical rhythm of the body when the cells and organs become improperly related. She uses economic depressions to break the rhythm of mass thought when great numbers of people become improperly related through business, social, and political activities. And she uses failure to break the rhythm of negative thought when an individual becomes improperly related to himself in his own mind. Observe carefully, and you will see that everywhere in nature there's always at work a natural law which gives eternal change to all matter, all energy, and to the power of thought. The only permanent thing in the universe is change. Eternal, inexorable change, through which every atom of matter and every unit of energy has the opportunity to properly relate itself to all other units of matter and energy, and every human being has the opportunity and the privilege of properly relating himself to all other human beings, no matter how many mistakes he makes, or how many times, or in what ways he may be defeated. When mass failure overtakes a nation, such as the 1929 World Business Depression, the circumstance is in perfect harmony with nature's plan to break up man's habits and give out fresh opportunities. Note: the beauty of publishing this book now, during the current economic turmoil, is that nature is once again breaking up man's habits and presenting fresh opportunities. End note. Question: what you are saying intrigues me. Am I to understand that hypnotic rhythm has something to do with the way people relate themselves to one another? Answer: that abstract, elusive thing called character is nothing but a manifestation of the law of hypnotic rhythm. Therefore, when speaking of one's character, it would be proper to say that his thought habits have been crystallized into a positive or a negative personality through hypnotic rhythm. One is good or bad because of the knitting together of his thoughts and deeds through hypnotic rhythm. One is bound by poverty or blessed with abundance because his aims, plans, and desires, or lack of them, have been made permanent and real by hypnotic rhythm. Question: is that all you have to say of the connection between hypnotic rhythm and human relationship? Answer: no, I have just begun. Remember, while I am talking, I am speaking of the influence of hypnotic rhythm in connection with all human relationships. Men who succeed in business do so entirely because of the way they relate themselves to their associates and to others outside of the business. Professional men who succeed do so largely because of the manner in which they relate themselves to their clients. It is much more important for the lawyer to know people and to know the laws of nature than it is to know the law. And the doctor is a failure before he starts unless he knows how to relate himself to his patients so as to establish their faith in him. Marriage succeeds or fails entirely because of the manner in which the participants relate themselves to one another. Proper relationship in marriage begins with a proper motive for the marriage. Most marriages do not bring happiness because the contracting parties neither understand nor attempt to understand the law of hypnotic rhythm, through the operation of which every word they speak, every act in which they engage, and every motive by which they are inspired to deal with each other is picked up and woven into a web that entangles them in controversial misery or gives to them the wings of freedom through which they soar above all forms of unhappiness. Every newly made acquaintanceship between people ripens into friendship and then into spiritual harmony, sometimes called love, or plants a germ of suspicion and doubt which evolves and grows into open rebellion, according to the way in which the participants in the acquaintanceship relate themselves to one another. Hypnotic rhythm picks up the dominating motives, aims, purposes, and feelings of the contacting minds and weaves these into some degree of faith or fear, love or hatred. After the pattern has taken definite shape, as it does with time, it is forced upon the contacting minds and made a part thereof. In this silent way does nature make permanent the dominating factors of every human relationship. In every human relationship, the evil motives and the evil deeds of the contacting individuals are coordinated and consolidated into definite form and subtly woven into that all-important human trait known as character. In the same manner, the motives and the deeds of good are consolidated and forced upon the individual. You see, therefore, It is not only one's deeds, but also one's very thoughts, which determine the nature of all human relationships. Question. You are leading into pretty deep water. Let's keep near the shore, or I can follow you without fear of getting beyond a safe depth. Go ahead and tell me how the subject of human relationships actually works in the current affairs of a problem-filled world such as we have today. Answer. That is a happy thought, but let me make sure you understand the principles I'm telling about before I try to show you how to apply them in the affairs of life. I wish to be sure you understand that the law of hypnotic rhythm is something that no one can control, influence, or evade. But everyone can relate himself to this law so as to benefit by its inexorable operation. Harmonious relationship with the law consists entirely of the individual changing his habits so they represent the circumstances and the things the individual wants and is willing to accept. No one can change the law of hypnotic rhythm any more than one can change the law of gravity, but everyone can change himself. Remember, therefore, in all the discussion of this subject, that all human relationships are made and maintained by the habits of the individuals related. The law of hypnotic rhythm plays only the part of solidifying the factors which constitute human relationships, but it does not create those factors. Before we go further with the discussion of human relationships, I want you to get a clear understanding of the subconscious mind. The term subconscious mind represents a hypothetical physical organ which has no actual existence. The mind of man consists of universal energy. Some call it infinite intelligence, which the individual receives, appropriates, and organizes in definite thought forms through the network of intricate physical apparatus known as the brain. These thought forms are replicas of various stimuli which reach the brain through the 5 commonly known physical senses and the 6th sense, which is not so well known. When any form of stimuli reaches the brain and takes the definite shape of thought, it is classified and stored away in a group of the brain cells known as the memory group. All thoughts of familiar nature are stored together so that the bringing forth of one leads to easy contact with all its associates. The system is very similar to the modern office filing cabinet, and it is operated in a similar manner. The thought impressions with which one mixes the greatest amount of emotion or feeling are the dominating factors of the brain because they are always near the surface, at the top of the filing system, so to speak, where they spring into action voluntarily, the moment an individual neglects to exercise self-discipline. These emotion-laden thoughts are so powerful, they often cause an individual to rush into action and indulge in deeds which have not been submitted or approved by his reasoning faculty. These emotional outbursts usually destroy harmony in all human relationships. The brain often brings together combinations of emotional feeling so powerful they completely set aside the control of the reasoning faculty. On all such occasions, human relationships are apt to be lacking in harmony. Through the operation of the 6th sense, the brain of a human being may contact the filing cabinet of other brains and inspect at will whatever thought impressions are on file there. The condition under which one person may contact and inspect the filing cabinet of another person's brain is generally known as harmony. But you may better understand what is meant if I say brains attuned to the same rate of thought vibration can easily and quickly exercise the privilege of entering and inspecting each other's filing cabinets of thoughts. In addition to receiving organized thoughts from the filing cabinets of other brains through the 6th sense, one can, through this same physical organ, contact and receive information from the universal storehouse known as infinite intelligence. All information reaching one's brain through the sixth sense comes from sources not easily isolated or traced. Therefore, this sort of information is generally believed to come from one's subconscious mind. The sixth sense is the organ of the brain through which one receives all information, all knowledge, all thought impressions which do not come through one or more of the five physical senses. Now that you understand how the mind operates, you will more easily understand how and why people come to grief through improper human relationships. You will also understand how human relationship may be made to yield riches in their highest form, riches in material, mental, and spiritual estates. Moreover, you will understand there can never be happiness except through understanding and application of the right principles of human relationships. You will understand, too, that no individual is an entity unto himself. The completeness of mind can be attained only by harmony of purpose and deed between two or more minds. You will understand why every human being should, of his own choice, become his brother's keeper in fact as well as in theory. Note: no one can change the law of hypnotic rhythm any more than one can change the law of gravity, but everyone can change himself. Have you ever tried to change someone else and only been frustrated when you realized you are not in control and therefore not succeeding? End note. Question: what you say may be true, but I still insist that you have me beyond safe depths of thought. Let us get back nearer to the shore, where I can wade in familiar water. We shall go out into the deep water after we learn to swim well. We started out to discuss the subject of how to profit by adversity, but it seems we have drifted somewhat afield from that subject. Answer: we have detoured, but we have not drifted. The devil never drifts. The detour was necessary in order that you might be prepared to understand the most important part of this entire interview. We are now ready to get back to the discussion of the subject of adversity. Inasmuch as most adversities grow out of improper relationships between people, it seems important to understand how people may become properly related. Naturally, the question arises as to what is a proper relationship between people. The answer is that the proper relationship is one that brings to all connected with it, or affected by it, some form of benefit. Note: the proper relationship is one that brings to all connected with it, or affected by it, some form of benefit. Take a moment to inventory your relationships at home, at work, and at play. List the relationships that seem in need of improvement and keep them in your mind as you continue reading. End note. Question: what then is an improper relationship? Answer: any relationship between people which damages anyone or brings any form of misery or unhappiness to any of the individuals. Question: how can improper relationships be corrected? Answer: by change of mind of the person causing the improper relationship, or by changing the persons to the relationship. Some minds harmonize naturally while others just as naturally clash. Successful human relationships, to endure as such, must be formed of minds that naturally harmonize, quite aside from the question of having common interest as a means of bringing them into harmony. When you speak of business leaders who succeed because they know how to pick men, you might more correctly say they succeed because they know how to associate minds which harmonize naturally. Knowing how to pick people successfully for any definite purpose in life is based upon ability to recognize the types of people whose minds naturally harmonize. Note: remember Hill's definition of the master mind: harmonious coordination of two or more minds working to a definite end. End of note. Question: stay focused on adversity, if you will. If there are possible benefits to be found through adversity, name some of them. Answer: adversity relieves people of vanity and egotism. It discourages selfishness by proving that no one can succeed without the cooperation of others. Adversity forces an individual to test his mental, physical, and spiritual strength. It thus brings him face to face with his weaknesses and gives him the opportunity to bridge them. Adversity forces one to seek ways and means to definite ends by meditation and introspective thought. This often leads to the discovery and the use of the sixth sense, through which one may communicate with infinite intelligence. Adversity forces one to recognize the need for intelligence not available except from sources outside of one's own mind. Adversity breaks old habits of thought and gives one an opportunity to form new habits. Therefore, it may serve to break the hold of hypnotic rhythm and change its operation from negative to positive ends. Question: what is the greatest benefit one may receive through adversity? Answer: the greatest benefit of adversity is that it may, and generally does, force one to change one's thought habits, thus breaking and redirecting the force of hypnotic rhythm. Question: in other words, failure always is a blessing when it forces one to acquire knowledge or to build habits that lead to the achievement of one's major purpose in life. Is that correct? Answer: yes, and something more. Failure is a blessing when it forces one to depend less upon material forces and more upon spiritual forces. Many human beings discover their other selves, the forces which operate through the power of thought, only after some catastrophe deprives them of the full and free use of their physical bodies. When a man can no longer use his hands and his feet, he usually begins to use his brain. Thus, he puts himself in the way of discovering the power of his own mind. Note: the devil brings in the other self here, revealing how we can use our power of thought and our other selves to discover our true power and major purpose. End note. Question: what benefits may be derived from the loss of material things, money, for example? Answer: the loss of material things may teach many needed lessons, none greater, however, than the truth that man has control over nothing and has no assurance of the permanent use of anything except his own power of thought. Question: I wonder if this is not the greatest benefit available through adversity. Answer: no. The greatest potential benefit of any circumstance which causes one to make a fresh start is that it provides an opportunity to break the grip of hypnotic rhythm and set up a new set of thought habits. New habits offer the only way out for people who fail. Most people who escape from the negative to the positive operation of the law of hypnotic rhythm do so only because of some form of adversity which forces them to change their thought habits. Question: isn't adversity apt to break one's self-reliance and cause one to give up hope? Answer: It has that effect on those whose willpower is weak through long established habits of drifting. It has the opposite effect on those who have not been weakened through drifting. The non-drifter meets with temporary defeat and failure, but his reaction to all forms of adversity is positive. He fights instead of giving up, and usually wins. Life gives no one immunity against adversity, but life gives to everyone the power of positive thought, which is sufficient to master all circumstances of adversity and convert them into benefits. The individual is left with the privilege of using or neglecting to use his prerogative right to think his way through all adversities. Every individual is forced either to use his thought power for the attainment of definite, positive ends, or by neglect or design, use this power for the attainment of negative ends. There can be no compromise, no refusal to use the mind. The law of hypnotic rhythm forces every individual to give some degree of use, either negative or positive, to his mind, but it does not influence the individual as to which use he will make of his mind. Note: the non-drifter meets with temporary defeat and failure, but his reaction to all forms of adversity is positive. He fights instead of giving up, and usually wins. Do you remember a time when you felt like giving up, but didn't? My co-author and I expand this concept in our book, 3 Feet from Gold, with stories of perseverance and never giving up from over 35 of today's top leaders, non-drifters of our time. End note. Question: am I to understand from what you say that every adversity is a blessing? Answer: no, I did not say that. I said there is the seed of an equivalent advantage in every adversity. I did not say there was the full-blown flower of advantage, just the seed. Usually the seed consists of some form of knowledge, some idea or plan, or some opportunity which would not have been available except through the change of thought habits forced by the adversity. Question: are those all the benefits available to human beings through failure? Answer: no. Failure is used by nature as a common language in which she chastises people when they neglect to adapt themselves to her laws. For example, the World War was man-made and destructive. Nature planted in the circumstances of the war the seed of an equivalent reprimand in the form of a world depression. The depression was inevitable and inescapable. It followed the war as naturally as day follows night, and by the operation of the same law, the law of hypnotic rhythm. Question: am I to understand that the law of hypnotic rhythm is the same as that which Ralph Waldo Emerson called the law of compensation? Answer: the law of hypnotic rhythm is the law of compensation. It is the power with which nature balances negative and positive forces throughout the universes, in all forms of energy, in all forms of matter, and in all human relationships. Question: does the law of hypnotic rhythm operate quickly in all instances? For example, does this law immediately bless one with the benefits of positive application of thoughts, or curse one immediately with the results of negative thoughts? Answer: the law operates definitely, but not always swiftly. Both the benefits and the penalties incurred through the law by individuals may be harvested by others, either before or after their death. Observe how this law works by forcing upon one generation of people the effects of both the sins and the virtues of preceding generations. In the operation of all nature's laws, the fourth dimension, time, is an inexorable factor. The length of time consumed by nature in the relation of effects to their causes depends, in every instance, on the circumstances at hand. Nature grows a pumpkin in 3 months. A good-sized oak tree requires 100 years. She converts a hen's egg into a chicken in 4 weeks, but she requires 9 months to convert the egg of a human being into an individual. Note: life gives no one immunity against adversity, but life gives to everyone the power of positive thought, which is sufficient to master all circumstances of adversity and convert them into benefits. Has nature created the current economic turmoil to allow us once again to convert our personal adversities into benefits? End of chapter. I'll meet you at the next video so we can continue listening to this confession. And what does the devil have to say about the environment, time, harmony, and apparently he's going to give us a caution. Please do hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends if you know that they can benefit from it.